swell, up your swell, up your swell. Up your wavy, up your wavy, up your wavy. Up your wavy. They were doing some scratching, ASMR, scratching your brain. I want you to feel the tingles in your brain. I make music, by the way. I make music. I'm doing a song with a challenge when the goal is to drop a song within to the end of the year. I drop 7 songs every Friday, 7 songs. So link in the description if you want to check that out. Link in the description if you want to check out what I dropped last Friday. I dropped 7 songs last Friday. And then you can go to my YouTube Shorts tab if you want to hear clips of everything I've made. I really appreciate it if you check it out. I really appreciate it if you check it out. Thank you in advance. Like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate it if you give me a sub, if you give me a like, comment, all that good stuff. It really helps spread the videos. So thank you. While you're getting your brain scratched, I thought I'd give you a history lesson. I've been reading a book, and it's very interesting. I'm a very slow reader. Well, it depends what I'm reading, of course. That's not gonna work. I think it might work. How I like to read is really slowly so that I can really take in the information and grasp what I'm reading. I think if you read too fast, you can miss some things. The nice thing about reading on your phone or Kindle is that, especially when you're coming across words you don't know, you can highlight them and then a definition pops up, then you can learn the word. I learned the word about term a priori, which is something that is knowledge that is gained without experience. For example, so stuff like mathematics employs the concept of a priori. Anyway, so if you're launching a rocket ship, you can know the details of how it's going to launch without actually launching it by, using mathematics. And then you can, make estimations, and that is knowledge that is gained a priori. And you can, I think I'm using it right? I think I'm using the term correctly in that sense. Where you can be like, based on our findings, then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to. These are a priori assumptions gained without experience. And then you can extrapolate from that where else that sort of phrase can be used. Anyway, so that's why I like to read slow. You learn new things. And it really sets itself inside your brain. You give yourself time. You're not trying to get through things too quickly. Reading about the history of the American blacks, American in general, race relations in America. I've touched on this briefly before, But basically, before the blacks got into Europe, into North America, you had well, this might have happened somewhat simultaneously through, the transatlantic slave trade and migration of Europeans from Europe to North America. But anyway, you had people from the United Kingdom, whether it be Ireland, England, parts of Scotland, I guess. Scotland is part of the UK. That almost sounds ignorant. I'm just saying countries in the UK. England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So yeah, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. You had people coming from there to Northern America now. The people that went towards the south were people that lived in the borderlands of these countries, England, Scotland, so on, etc. People from those regions went to the south, so the borderlands. People at the borderlands of those European countries went to the south and became what we know as rednecks now. So you had your northern whites and you had your southern whites, and there were marked differences between the two groups. Redneck culture is generally seen as ignorant and violent and rambunctious, whereas the northern whites were a bit more sophisticated and efficient and educated and more industrious. And the reason for that was the two different cultures. Even the way they worshipped, the way they had church was different. Southern churches were more animated and eccentric, and there's a lot of performance involved, and the preachers were very, lively in the way they would speak in these dramatic tones and so on and so forth. Whereas we go to the north, it's more sober, quiet. This is actually very intellectual, and there's debates, and there's this and there's that. And it was because of these sorts of this method of religious debate that even science as a field was further established, because they would debate God and stuff like that, and eventually were like, maybe if we learn more about our universe, we can learn more about God. And that's part of how science was established as a field of study. And it kind of started in Europe, but we saw the same thing happening in North America as well. That's how institutions like your Harvards and your Yales and your Princetons were founded as well, through that pursuit of knowledge and gaining. And by knowing more about the world around us, we can perhaps know more about the Creator. That's a fact, by the way. That's literally what happened. But anyway, so you can see the difference between these two regions. So now, 1/3 of whites were in the South. So, the rest are in the North, I guess, and other parts of the continent. The issue with blacks was that 9/10 of black people were in the South. Only 1/10 was in the North. So you had these two regions dominated by these two different cultures. One culture was very unproductive. The other culture was very productive. if you were raised in one culture, you tended to act a certain way. If you're raised in another culture, you tended to act a certain way. Keep in mind, 9/10 of black people at that time were in the South. Now, you had people from the North that would come and plant schools and churches in the South. So there were those who had the benefit of, there was a region in the North called New England. They had the benefit of these New England transplants where you could get Northern education in the South, but it was like small pockets. You know, the South was predominantly dominated by redneck culture. So you had black rednecks, you had white rednecks. And these were like, you know, these are not very orderly people. These are not very, to be frank, civilized people that often get into violent disputes. Arguments would turn violent. They drank a lot. They weren't very efficient at work. People there are letters that have been recovered from that time period of people writing about how you'd go to a business establishment and the owner would be out because he went to go drinking or to go fishing with his friends, and you're like, who's here to serve me? And that was a common complaint of just inefficiency and lack of professionalism. These were the Southern whites, right, that were behaving this way. And things like laziness, where they had this vast farmland and they had all these cows, and yet the majority of the dairy products were being produced in the North, who didn't have as much of an abundance in agriculture, in agricultural resources, right? And yet they were producing most of the cheese. And in fact, Southerners would import cheese from overseas and other things from overseas, which is ridiculous when you have the resources yourself, because they were lazy and they didn't really learn how to do these things. And even when they did do it, they weren't really good at it. Things like butter, they were terrible at making butter. But the Northerners they'd have to buy butter from the Northerners, and people who would come from the North to the South would be like, the butter here is terrible. What the hell? And this was redneck culture. And it's not specific to a race group, because anyway, I'll get into that, but basically, anyone who was raised in this culture turned out a certain way, and these were not people you genuinely wanted to be around, because they cause problems. If you're trying to have an organized society where everyone is respecting each other and doing their due diligence in terms of maintaining a healthy society, they're contributing, they're doing their part. You don't want certain individuals mixing in. So white people would feel a certain way so the Northern whites would feel a certain way about the Southern whites. And as blacks, even Northern blacks would feel a certain way about Southern blacks. Like it's just a thing where it's like, listen, we have two different lifestyles. It's two very, very different ways of doing things. And one way is clearly more efficient than the other, and more productive and more conducive to human flourishing. So when slavery was abolished and you started to see a lot of black people migrating to the North. So wait, before I get there, something very interesting began to happen in the North. Before the 1960s with the Civil Rights Act, we're talking about the 20s, the 1910, even before then, like late 1800s. Should I pause? You started to see a lot of racist attitudes amongst white folks beginning to dissipate because they saw black communities in the North becoming more and more organized, and these preconceptions of black people being these animals who are incapable of civilized behavior, those preconceptions began to be dismantled because they saw black people living well, doing well. They were educated, they're running businesses. A lot of them were very successful, and you started to see people getting promoted to positions of considerable power in certain institutions, and this was happening long before the Civil Rights Act, long before people started to systemically combat racism, right? And race relations to improve, and this is interesting. This was very interesting to me. You started to see black people living in neighborhoods with whites before the 60s. This I'm talking about 40s, 30s, the 20s. But then, I think, because slavery was a predominantly southern phenomenon, but there was no real slavery in the North. When slavery was officially abolished, the slaves from the South started moving towards the North. Now, keep in mind what I said about redneck culture and how it predominated that area, and how 9/10 of blacks were in the South. There were enclaves of places in the South that had New England philosophies, New England being in the North. So not all blacks that came from the South were ratchet, rednecks, but you see this sudden influx of rednecks into the North, and what ends up happening is you see all of a sudden a deterioration in race relations, where those old racist attitudes start to re-emerge. Why is that? Well, these rowdy black people, it sounds wild, but bear with me, started showing up. Crime went up, violence went up. They're very loud, very obnoxious. They're just very different. And it's not what you're used to in your community, in your society, right? That you've established. So, race relations deteriorate. And there was also a schism between the blacks who'd been born in the North and the blacks who'd migrated from the South. There was a dislike between them. And there was also an interesting dynamic between light-skinned black people and dark-skinned black people, because typically the light-skinned blacks were the ones who would have obviously white parents, and so on and so forth. So they were raised differently. Probably they had more access to education. A lot of them would maybe have lived in the North. So they're raised in different cultures, essentially. So people would attribute, would attribute the difference between the mixed race blacks and the dark skinned blacks. They attribute the differences to race, to say this person is part white, that's why they're more civilized. That wasn't true. The reason why they were more behaved and easier to get along with and just more productive was because of the culture they were raised in, the opportunities they were given, because they had affluent parents who happened to be whites, and obviously the white people in that were the dominant group in North America. So they were just more likely to be raised in a more productive culture. Now, if you were a mixed race person that was raised in the South, so you had a redneck father and a redneck mother, you'd see that you being mixed blood doesn't really make you more productive, or it doesn't really help you integrate well into the northern culture. That played no bearing on that at all. So it showed that wasn't a racial thing. It was a cultural thing. You weren't likely to score more in tests and so on and so forth. Like, that just wasn't the case. In fact, when missionaries from the north, so these Christian missionaries from the north would come to the South and establish schools there, they were shocked. Because when they persisted and were very patient, they had to be very, very patient with the black kids, because again, the culture that those kids were raised in made them very combative and argumentative, and they would disrespect authority and stuff like that. But when they were patient with them and gave them time, they would see that these kids were actually very, very capable of doing well academically. And again, it dismantled a lot of these racist preconceptions and proved that we're all human beings. And some people just, you can't help what culture you're born into. It is what it is. But if some people are given assistance and help and shown a better way, they'll take the better way. But yeah, anyway, Southern blacks pour into the northern region of America. Race relations deteriorate when they were previously doing well. But time passes. What's the word that I'm looking for? I know there's acclimate, but that's... There's a word I'm looking for that I learned that I'm forgetting. Anyway, I'm not going to remember that word. Yeah, let me give it up. There's a word that's similar to acclimate, but it's not acclimate. But anyway, the Southern blacks eventually acclimated to the northern region, and then again you start to see race relations improve. And then came the civil rights era. Blacks were actually economically doing better. Like the GDP amongst the black community was rising rapidly. And then what we saw is at the introduction of the Civil Rights Act, the rate of growth stagnated. In fact, it decreased. But then you introduce the rate of growth, and then you look at, you introduce the Civil Rights Act, and then you observe that, there's growth occurring here. You weren't looking at the growth before the moment that you introduced the Civil Rights Act, right? You weren't really studying that. You're just studying everything that happened after you introduced the Civil Rights Act, and you're assuming that this growth that you're seeing is a result of the Civil Rights Act, when that growth was occurring decades before then. Decades. And in fact, the Civil Rights Act stagnated that growth. if not just reduced it entirely. So it was still happening, but now it was like at a much lower rate, and it would eventually do this. Because if you think about momentum, and it's something was rising, and then something kind of knocks it off course, you're seeing it. You're seeing it. It still has this upward trajectory, but you don't realize that it's going down now. And this takes years to really manifest fully. And the reason why that was is now the government was involved in something that was supposed to happen naturally, which is when people integrate into a society, into an economy, into a culture, they just naturally start to adopt those practices, and people will naturally get along and start doing business with each other, like we saw in the 40s and before then, where there were black people living in these white communities. First black senator. The first black senator went back as early as 1870. So we're seeing how, because these people acclimated well to the environment, they gained the trust of the people within that environment, and race relations improved, people's preconceived notions were dismantled, and you saw black people get positions of real power within the country, whether it be in universities, whether it be in government. Doesn't matter, they're running businesses, they're doing well. This is the stuff they don't teach people in school, I'm realizing. But anyway, but now they try to institutionalize a lot of these things that are supposed to happen naturally, and what we see is the government stifled that growth and started dividing everyone and being like, we're racist, and white black people are like this and white people are like this, and what we started seeing more in a more sinister sense is the normalization of redneck culture that was being transplanted from the South, where people started viewing that as black culture. You see blacks behaving in a certain way that's wild to everyone, and they're like, what is going on here? And he's like, no, that's just black culture, they're just different from me. It's not bad, it's just different. And we started creating all these government programs, these social welfare programs that only just further incentivized these behaviors. Because previously, if you were acting that way, if you were engaging in redneck activities, you'd be booted out. Like the society would turn on you, and you'd be forced to either leave or change. Leave is probably a nice way of putting it. I'm sure there are other things that happened, but yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that by institutionalizing this stuff and creating these social welfare programs, redneck culture was given an environment in which it could flourish, because there was no incentive to change anymore. You could be as ratchet as you wanted to be, and the government would endorse it. They'll pay you. We started seeing the rate of fatherlessness in the black community shoot through the roof, to the extent now that it's normal to say that black guys don't have black people don't have fathers in their life. It's normal now. It's a joke that people just make. Because again, women get paid. When you're single and you're a single mom, you get paid. You get paid to not have a man in the house. So it incentivizes split households, essentially. How about you pay families who are together? How about you incentivize that? And then maybe you might see more fathers staying in the home, less divorce, because women initiate divorce 70% of the time, stuff like that. Maybe if you didn't incentivize this behavior, you wouldn't see it nearly as much. But again, all these social welfare programs and the food stamps and the this and the that and the affirmative action and all that stuff, it led to the situation where we're at now, where black people are one of the most poorest groups in the country, in America. That was not always the case. Certain subsets of black people, as a whole, especially in the North, you'd see them earning as much as their white counterparts. Things were becoming more and more equal, and it was happening without government insistence, without government intervention. There's a Chris Rock stand-up comedy special, and in that special he has a joke. It's called Niggas versus Black People. You should watch that. He outlines something we intuitively know, like we've all recognized as black people. You don't need to have read a book to notice this, that there are the black people who are trying to get ahead, and then the black people who are just ignorant, violent, loud, annoying criminals, just the worst of us, who are holding us back. So he made a joke about these niggas and then these black people. A show like Boondocks would also kind of explore these concepts, and there was this joke about these two black guys when they have a nigger moment where, everything's normal, then all of a sudden they're just fighting and shooting at each other in public, being very ignorant, dangerous. I've reached my limit. I'm waiting for this thing to stop recording. I think it started a new file. There was a nigger moment recently in the Kansas City Chiefs shooting incident in America just a week ago or something like that. It turns out that the individuals were implicated in this were black. One of them at least was black. The other guy's probably black. I think it's actually 4 individuals that have been identified. I'm pretty. Everyone kind of knows those guys are probably black, especially when you read the details of the story. Like, who else would do that in America? But basically, an argument broke out, and people started shooting at each other because of the argument. Which demographic is most likely to do something like that? Let's just be honest. But yeah, they identified one of the people. He is black, and the other guy's name is Dominique Wilson. So we'll see. But he sounds black. We'll see who he is. But anyway, they had a nigger moment. They were arguing, and then they just pulled out guns and started shooting at each other. When you watch the Boondocks, right, you would think that this is just fiction. This is just an exaggeration. It's hyperbolic. This would never happen in real life. They literally had a scene in the Boondocks where these guys were arguing. Things were normal, and then they started arguing, and then just pulled out guns and started shooting at each other like crazy in public. And it was funny because it's a cartoon, and he's like, this would never happen in real life. Bro. That's exactly what happened at the Super Bowl recently. They started shooting at each other after an argument, and people got shot. Like 20-something people got shot. One person died. This lady got killed. Redneck culture. Or nigger culture. You can call it what you want. You got niggers and you got black people. That's the Chris Rock joke. You should go listen to it, man. If you're black, you've seen it. You know the difference between the black people that are trying to get ahead and the black people that are holding everyone back. We need to start being honest about this. Because we're not helping each other, man, when we condone bad behavior. We're just holding ourselves back as black people. And then you got the white liberals who condone a lot of the stuff. Some of them, I think, maybe not all of them, but some of them I think is intentional because they want to hold us back. But then the others are just ignorant and dumb. And it's like, you're not helping. All you're doing is perpetuating negative behavior. You're reinforcing it. When you see someone doing something dumb and ignorant, you should call it out and be like, stop. If you have someone in your life that you love and they're doing something stupid, are you not going to tell them to stop? I know I will. If I see my brother or my mom or anyone I love doing something dumb, I'll be like, stop doing that. What are you doing? I'm not going to tell them to keep doing you. That's crazy. But for some reason, it's acceptable with black people, right? And then it establishes these stereotypes that people start to think they're just like this. They can't be helped. They're just like this. But no, it's not. They're not just like this. This is a culture that's been reinforced for like more than a century. Centuries, not more, multiple centuries. Luckily, kids are fresh, right? Kids come into this world with a fresh eye. So if you can get to the children, you can pretty much eradicate redneck culture in a generation. But it takes the will to do so. Right now, there's a lack of willingness. But listen to that Chris Rock joke. It's very enlightening. A lot of truth bombs. Yeah, I rambled in this one. Hope you got satisfying tingles, and I hope you enjoyed the history lesson. I like to pray at the end of my videos. Dear God, thank you for the individual watching this right now. Thank you for making them whole, unique, and guiding them on a path towards peace, prosperity, and purpose. Peace, prosperity, and purpose. Thank you for blessing this individual with wonderful people in their life who love them, take care of them, and bring the absolute best out of them. Thank you for maintaining the ones that are there to do the same thing. Thank you for blessing this person with a spirit of gratitude, so they can give thanks for all the wonderful things in their life, and by giving thanks, they can attract even more blessings and find peace and contentment as well. And the blessings they already have. Let your presence be felt in this person's life. Let them know that you're God, that you're real, that you're loving them, and that you're taking care of them. Good health, long life, and happiness over this person, everyone they care about. In my name I pray. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.